Welcome to the Debrief, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where those stories are going next. I'm managing editor Greg Wilson, and today I'm joined by politics editor Jim Antle. Jim?
Good to be here.
Jim, the situation in Ukraine grows grimmer by the day. Russia's massing troops across Ukraine's eastern border. Ukraine seems to be anticipating an imminent invasion. When might we see things go kinetic?
We could be reaching that point very soon. So the Biden administration has tried to project some strength on this and some toughness and to say to Vladimir Putin, no, don't do this. But they've been very vague as to what the consequences will actually be. They've said that there will be consequences, but they've ruled out the use of U.S. troops, at least at this point. They've suggested that it will probably not be a military response. They're going to look very heavily toward our European allies, the international community, and then the actual consequences that they've really specified lean very heavily on the economic side. So we're talking about sanctions, we're talking about shutting Russia out of international markets, we're talking about trying to up the pressure on what is a relatively poor country, especially compared to the Soviet Union days, and trying to exact that kind of leverage on them. The question that they keep facing is, well, those types of measures were deployed when Russia annexed Crimea, when Joe Biden was vice president, and they didn't seem sufficient to really deter Putin. So what will deter him now?
We know that President Trump armed Ukraine with the Javelin anti-tank missiles, which may have served as somewhat of a deterrent. But in the event of an invasion, is there a consensus behind Biden's approach right now, or are there lawmakers that want to do more?
So what the Biden administration has said, what National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has said, is that they're now willing to do things that they weren't willing to do in 2014. So that implies that this Democratic administration might be more supportive of lethal aid to Ukraine than the Obama administration was. That was sort of a big, interesting dynamic in that, you know, Trump was supposed to be soft on Russia, but he actually, in terms of trying to deter Putin in Ukraine, and in terms of arming allies, was tougher on Russia, even though the whole delay of the aid became a really big issue in his first impeachment. But the Biden administration is taking a line that a big part of their military deterrent to Putin is going to be that they're going to supply materials to not only Ukraine, but also to fortify other allies in the region who are going to be concerned that Russian expansionism might even go beyond Ukraine. So the hope is that this will deter Putin, but we don't know.
And I guess it's worth noting that while Ukraine very much wants to be a NATO partner, it is not a member of NATO.
Right.
Although NATO has some strategic alliance with Ukraine. Finally, Jim, we saw the other day where the defense ministers in China and Russia had explored strengthening ties. Is the nightmare scenario that we could see a simultaneous invasion of Ukraine and China moving on Taiwan?
And the question would be, are we prepared for that? I mean, historically speaking, the U.S. military has been prepared to fight a two-front war, but when you look at what happened in Afghanistan, when you look at how some of our Middle East interventions, where these are much smaller countries with weaker militaries, often fighting insurgencies after we've overthrown the governments, and these things have not gone particularly well, are we able to fight a military, even at Russia's level, much less an emerging superpower in China? And that's a real question. I think the Biden administration has tried to approach this from an ideological point of view, where they're rallying democracies. He's holding this summit for democracy. So Biden recognizes that there could be an emerging alliance of autocracies and is rushing to counter it. But that doesn't mean that we're militarily prepared. When you look at things like the hypersonic missile testing, when you look at Russia's adventures in space recently, are we really prepared for that? And that's a really frightening question. Splitting China and the Soviets was really a big part of how we won the Cold War. To see that maybe emerging as an alliance again is very troubling.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
You can read Jim's coverage as well as the rest of the Washington Examiner's work at washingtonexaminer.com. Thank you.